Well, guys, we are down to the final four in this FIFA Women's World Cup, and things could not get any tighter, nor could they get any more difficult to predict. But we're going to give a shot at it, guys, as we decide between Spain, Sweden, Australia, and England to see which two will head to a World Cup final. Guys, Matty G back here with you on Football with Flags. Thanks so much for joining us as always. Let's get this video kicked off. All right, guys, before we get to these predictions, though, we had to at least give a shout out to each of the four teams that exited the quarterfinals. It was a great round of football all the way around, and these games were must-watch TV for sure. For the Dutch, I know it's unfortunate not to get back to a final the way they did in 2019, but again, keep in mind, this was just a third ever appearance in a World Cup final. I think the future is very bright for this federation going forward. Definitely, hopefully, a lot of more deep runs in major competitions for them down the road. As for Japan, they are always class on and off the field and leave a lot of great memories, both with their team and their fan base. Definitely felt like after the group stage, they had a great shot and were potentially a favorite to go all the way, but unfortunately, it just wasn't in the cards for them to get an equalizer against Sweden and continue that game going. But for France, definitely feel like hopefully Hervé Renard sticks with this team as they continue to seek out that first ever major title. Again, I definitely think this team is, in good hands in terms of their roster going forward, even with the veteranship that they have. But certainly hope that Hervé will stick around a bit longer with this side and see if maybe they can finally get to a major final and get it done in the near future. As for Colombia, Linda Caicedo was sensational. A lot of great pieces on this Colombian side, and they were so competitive getting to their first ever quarterfinal of a Women's World Cup. And hopefully, again, we're going to see her for a long time coming with this side, and hopefully as well just making women's football that much more competitive in South America as the game continues to grow. Again, another great run for them and all four of these teams. Just wanted to give a quick shout out on the tournaments that they had. Guys, we'll get things started off with Spain and Sweden, and we'll go over pretty much the same format that we did last time, give a little game preview, go over how we think each of these teams will line up tactically, and then give our prediction from there. We'll start off with Spain, who've gotten to this point pretty comfortably. They had that little hiccup against Japan to end the group stage, but have rebounded nicely with 7 goals in their last 2 games and really control both of those games quite well, and they've been phenomenal to watch also. Despite all the backlash and issues they've had off the field with their manager, the women on the roster, their federation, etc., a lot of different issues. This has been a great run for them to get to this point, to get to their first ever semifinal of a World Cup. Remember, this is just their 3rd ever appearance in the finals as well. As for Sweden, they're looking to get back to the World Cup final for the first time since 2003 when they lost to Germany. They finished 3rd 3 separate times, including a 3rd place finish in 2019, but obviously looking to get over that hump this time around. They've been pretty stout defensively, had a couple of fortunate calls with VAR, but certainly deserved to be in this position. The last time these two met was in 2022 in a friendly. Spain outshot Sweden that day 26-16 and had 66 to 34% possession. Guys, I do feel like we'll see a similar stat line just in terms of Spain potentially outshooting Sweden and having more possession of the ball in this game. We'll have to wait and see, but I do feel like those are pretty consistent numbers that we could see again this time around. We'll just have to wait and see who's maybe a bit more clinical with their chances, or if we might see another penalty shootout. All right, guys, this is how we think Spain and Sweden are going to line up. Spain keeping that 4-3-3. They've looked very good in it thus far throughout the tournament. Sweden maybe continuing with that 4-2-3-1. However, the last time these two played, Sweden did come out in a 3-4-1-2 or 3-5-2, if you will, depending on how you want to look at that other midfielder. Rolfo was at the 10 position that time. These two played in that friendly last year. So, but I do feel like Sweden's going to continue with a 4-2-3-1. They've looked very good in it defensively, as we've talked about, especially with those 2 holding midfielders. Being able to create a good block there in front of the 18-yard box and force play out wide, but also just have a little bit of extra coverage on top of the box as well, which I think is going to be key because we've seen Spain look to pull the trigger a number of different times from certain areas around there as well, and they can certainly put it on frame at the same time. I think Sweden need, again, like we talked about, to be stout defensively. They need to be aggressive on their set pieces. We've seen how good they've been with those so far in this competition. Ilestedt, she's got 4 goals, the center back for Sweden. I think she'll be pivotal in this game as well. I think Blackstenius, she's going to have to really create a number of different chances. We've seen her kind of go in and out in some of these games throughout the competition, but I think she's going to have a good one this time around. But she's definitely going to be pivotal leading the line there in terms of attacking opportunities for Sweden. But I think the main thing that Sweden need to do is they need to be physical on both sides of the ball, winning 50-50s as much as possible, but they need to take the game to Spain. I think we saw them do that against Japan very well. They didn't sit back. They didn't, just look to be defensive and break out when they could. They looked to try and create a lot of opportunities, get numbers forward at the right time against Japan, and it wound up paying off for them in the end. I think they need to really come out with the same mindset and be aggressive against this Spanish side from the get-go. As for Spain, of course, we've talked about it several times so far throughout this competition. Got to have possession with a purpose. They cannot give the ball away cheaply, especially in their own half, or if they have those midfielders higher up the field looking to create attacking opportunities. I think that space behind that midfield line and before that back four is going to be very pivotal for Blackstenius, Rolfo, and more to try and exploit against Spain. So Spain are really going to have to be cautious of that, not giving the ball away cheaply, looking to use the half spaces and the width as much as possible, especially considering if Sweden keep a good block there in front of their 18-yard box. I think if Spain are able to exploit space out wide, using those half spaces and get the ball to the end line and look to cut it inside, get shots maybe across the 6-yard box or across the top of the 18, could be very pivotal because we know that they can be clinical. And we've seen Bonmati, Redondo, Jenny Hermoso and others be clinical inside the box as well. So I think if they're able to get the ball to the end line and then look to maybe play something across, could be very beneficial for them in the long run. But right now, guys, it's really tough to call. I think both of these semifinals are just so up in the air in terms of how to predict them, and think you could honestly flip a coin almost for each of them. But for right now, I'm actually going to go with Spain heading to their first ever World Cup final. On to our second semifinal between the Matildas and the Lionesses. We'll get things started off with Australia, who again are already on a historic run. They've never made it past the quarterfinals in a Women's World Cup. But again, we talked about this before the tournament started. If they were able to get to this point, just how fantastic that would be for their women's federation, the support that we've seen every single game that they've had, and just the electric atmospheres that they've brought with their fans every single time. It's just been an incredible run thus far to this point. And even if they don't make it past this game, still a historic run and something I think that Australia could certainly build on. They've had a great run in this competition. The fact that Sam Kerr hasn't been available the entire time has been disappointing, but this team has still picked it up when they needed to and taken on more responsibility every chance they could. Mackenzie Arnold's been incredible, especially during that penalty shootout, as well as the ladies that were able to come up clutch in that moment and get the job done against France to get to this point. So it's been a great run already. As for England, really, really tough scare there against Nigeria, but they got the job done. And to get to this point with that 2-1 win against Colombia is phenomenal. Remember, England's never, they've always gotten to a quarterfinal or farther in a Women's World Cup. So the fact that they're back to this semifinal is certainly not a surprise to anyone. I think the fact that Hemp was able to score right there before halftime was pivotal in that game in terms of just changing the momentum a little bit and getting on equal terms as they came out in the second half. And then Russo got the game winner to get that game against Colombia 2-1. And of course, the loss for Lauren James still in the semifinal is going to be tough. But England, despite, again, having their backs against the wall several different times, being in some nervy positions, have really done well to get to this point once again for the European champions. Remember, though, the last time these two teams met was in a friendly, and Australia were able to beat England and end that winning streak that they had that I believe was around 30 games or so. So again, certainly some redemption, possibly a little bit of a chip on the shoulder for the Lionesses in terms of getting a shot to take on Australia on their own turf and try and spoil the party and get to a World Cup final for the first time ever. All right, guys, this is how we think Australia and England are going to line up. Certainly Australia probably sticking with that 4-4-2. I definitely feel like England will stick with the 3-5-2. We'll see if they make any minor adjustments. I'm not 100% sure they will. Of course, Lauren James, like we said, she's going to be out once again. So I believe Ella Toone will probably take her spot there in that 10 role. But for England, in terms of this game, I definitely feel like they're going to have to control the tempo, maybe slow the game down at times, force Australia to chase. Again, they're going to have the crowd behind them. So I think England keeping possession is going to be very important. They had a lot of possession when these two played in April. I think that will be consistent once again this time around. And I think the way England look to press in this game, whether it's through their attacking midfielders, getting the ball forward, getting numbers higher up the field, and using width is going to be important, but also trying to suffocate Australia whenever the Matildas get the ball back. Can they win it back quickly in their own half and look to try and create chances off of that? Because again, we know how good Australia can be in transition and on the counterattack. So again, that midfield five for England is going to be very important on both sides of the ball, especially being able to create chances and try and be threatening with Mackenzie Arnold. We know how physical this English side team, English team can be, especially on corners and set pieces. They can, have a little bit of trickery up their sleeve as well, but they can also poach and they can, find goals the ugly way too. It doesn't have to be pretty. So again, Australia is going to have to be sharp in terms of their back line and their defensive structure when they're without the ball, which probably will be a good majority of this game. As for Australia, again, we talked about transition and counterattacks. We know how dangerous this team is with Mary Fowler, Ford, etc. Catley even getting forward at times and stuff as well, and especially once Sam Kerr gets on the field, that's definitely going to be what they're going to have to look to the most in this game, especially with that electric atmosphere behind them. I definitely think that Australia are going to create a lot of good opportunities the way they did the last time these two played, but I also think they're going to have to be a bit more direct, especially once England's midfield get higher up the field. Can they penetrate, lines of defense? Can they be more direct in terms of getting the ball out wide into space, especially behind that midfield five, pressuring that back three and through gaps as well between the back three also, especially trying to maybe go at Millie there centrally. But we'll have to wait and see how Australia do with that. I'll be honest, guys, too. I think that if Sam Kerr does come off the bench again, it's not the worst thing in the world, especially if this game's still tied. Or again, if it's just a one-goal game, one way or the other. I think her presence when she came on the field against France was huge. They had a resurgence of life going forward, and for the next 5 to 10 minutes, they were suffocating France in terms of the amount of chances they created, and really probably should have scored a goal there in normal time as well, creating a couple of good opportunities. So. If she does come off the bench again, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, and I think it could definitely play a factor in terms of how this momentum of the game shifts, especially in the second half or into extra time if we need it. But guys, right now, again, I think this game's such a toss-up. I really think you could flip a coin, to be honest with you. And keep in mind, too, England's manager, this is the only loss she has ever faced so far in terms of her tenure with England thus far, was losing to Australia in April. So again, they are going to have a chip on their shoulder looking to rebound and get back at the Matildas, especially knowing how historic of a moment this is and on their own soil, trying to get some payback and get to their first ever World Cup final as well. So again, it's going to be a phenomenal game. And again, I'm going to mention a point here in the next slide, but right now, guys, I'm going to stick with Australia. I just like the momentum that they're carrying. Again, I love the atmosphere. I think it is doing so much for this team in terms of just their spirit, their confidence, and how they're going forward. And I feel like at the end of the day, despite England maybe having more chances and more possession in this game, that the Matildas might be able to get it done and get to a World Cup final. So there you have it, guys. That's how we think our bracket's going to end up, with Spain and Australia going to the final with a third-place match with Sweden and England. And again, I feel a bit torn even making these decisions because, when we made our predictions before this tournament even began, we had Sweden and England going to the final facing one another, with Sweden taking the crown. But for some reason, I've just had a change of heart the last couple days looking at how these fixtures have gone on and what could potentially happen. And right now, I just feel like I've got to go with Spain and Australia getting to the final. Again, I definitely feel like these games are toss-ups and could go either way, and we very well could see a Sweden-England final or a different combination. But right now, guys, I'm going to stick with Spain and Australia making it to their both first ever World Cup final. Guys, as always, thanks so much for your support. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already done so. We're going to have plenty of more content coming your way in the next week or so as we finish up this tournament and beyond going forward. But again, please let us know down in the comments as well your own predictions for these semifinals and beyond if you'd like. I would certainly love seeing those and seeing what everybody's got that they're thinking about as well. But again, guys, have a blessed day. We'll see you soon. And until next time, peace.